Let's say that a global recession does occur. Where can investors hide? What do they do with their portfolios in order to be able to protect themselves in a recessionary period like this?
Well, again, if the recessionary period is followed by inflation, which is how governments try to stimulate economies in recession, they run deficits and their central banks print money, then it's a hedge against inflation is what you need. So you need real things, like I said, commodities, precious metals, companies that own real assets that can raise their prices without, destroying their market. The same things that I've been describing. But I don't think it's going to be a global recession. I mean, I think there will be economies in recession, maybe some of the developed economies that have a lot of debt. But I think emerging markets could actually enjoy a boom as developed markets are enjoying a bust. They have a lot more productivity. They don't have the debt. They don't have the older populations dependent on government money. So I think you can have a dynamic where you have recession or very slow growth in, the developed economies that have been doing all the QE and have had artificially low interest rates. But then the emerging markets, really pick up the slack, especially if their currencies appreciate significantly, and that gives their consumers more purchasing power. If that results in better inflows of capital into those economies to escape the stagflationary economies of more developed countries. And especially if the dollar loses its role as the reserve currency, which is clearly in jeopardy right now, and we've placed it in greater jeopardy with the sanctions on Russia and driving Russia and China closer together, maybe even pulling India into the mix and pissing off a lot of people and reminding a lot of people of the dangers of holding dollars as a reserve and the extraordinary power that is given to the U.S. By virtue of its ability to sanction anybody it wants if it disagrees with what they're doing. Not that I agree with what Putin is doing, and it doesn't even matter. It's just that every country that's a sovereign government knows that it may do something one day that the United States doesn't like. I'm sure the United States does stuff that a lot of other countries don't like, but they can't sanction us because it's our currency everybody's using. But the ultimate sanction is to stop using our currency, because then what good is it? Because then the dollar is just worth what we produce. And we don't produce much. I mean, in aggregate, look at our trade deficits. We have a deficit of over $100 billion a month. That is enormous.
What is the most asymmetric bet that you have in your portfolio right now? Is it an equity or something else that you're like, look, this is the thing that I believe has the most upside?
That's my mining stocks. Maybe my silver mining stocks or junior mining stocks. I mean, the ones that we own in the Euro-Pacific Gold Fund or the separate accounts that are managed by Adrian Day or my own personal account. I mean, I think those are the stocks that could not only be 10 baggers, but 50, 100 baggers. I mean, you go back and you look at what happened to gold stocks in the latter part of the 1970s, early 1980s. That's what happened, right? And so I expect something similar. I mean, maybe it won't be as meteoric as what happened with Bitcoin. It's hard to repeat that. But I think it's going to be big. And I have a lot of real money in this trade. I mean, I think most of the people that got into Bitcoin when it was, $1 or $10, they didn't put that much money in. Maybe a few people did, but most people didn't put much. So I've got a big bet riding on these mining stocks, a much bigger bet than I ever would have made on crypto, even if I made the bet.
Do you own any Bitcoin? Peter Schiff,
no,
do you own any Bitcoin?
I don't own any Bitcoin. Why would I be dumb enough to buy Bitcoin?
Well, because Bitcoin's up 212% over the last 2 years and gold's only up 5%, which means gold hasn't outperformed inflation and Bitcoin outperformed your whole portfolio. That'd be one reason.
Well, it hasn't outperformed it year to date. It hasn't outperformed it in the last year. I mean, Bitcoin in November of last year was almost 70,000, and now it's barely 30,000. I mean, gold doesn't do that. Gold doesn't drop by 50, 60%.
Because it doesn't go up 50 or 60% either.
Well, yes, it does. I just told you 20 years ago, it was under 300.
20 years ago, I don't even think I knew how to read yet.
That's the point. You should listen to people who were around back then. You know, the world existed, you know, when you were still in diapers or before you were born. So I got some gray hairs, if you haven't noticed. So I've been around the block a few times.
You also have dial-up Wi-Fi, it looks like, but I wasn't going to say nothing about that dial-up internet.